welcome. My name is Alessandro Rosanò, and I am an assistant professor of European Union law at the University of Parma. Over the next few minutes, I would like to discuss with you how the EU Common Agricultural Policy contributes to promoting sustainability in the food sector. In 2019, in the communication on the European Green Deal, the European Commission highlighted, among other things, the need to promote sustainability in the food sector. In this regard, it was emphasized that European food, known for being safe, nutritious, and of high quality, should become the global benchmark for sustainability. The reason behind this choice is that some fundamental challenges need to be tackled, such as feeding a rapidly growing world population, fighting against pollution caused by food production, climate change, and food waste, and protecting biodiversity. Therefore, European farmers were identified as key players in managing the transition towards more sustainable food systems, and a farm-to-fork strategy was announced to support their efforts, achieve a circular economy, and reduce the impact of food processing and retail on the environment. The farm-to-fork strategy was presented in 2020 as a new comprehensive approach to how Europeans value food sustainability, being at the heart of the Green Deal. In it, the European Commission expressed its willingness to address the challenges posed by the achievement of sustainable food systems in a comprehensive manner, acknowledging the undeniable links between healthy people, healthy societies, and a healthy planet. As the establishment of sustainable food systems would prove necessary to reach the climate and environmental objectives of the Green Deal, improve the incomes of primary producers, and reinforce EU's competitiveness, the European Commission announced that two closely related legislative proposals would have been tabled between 2023 and 2024, one on the definition of sustainable food systems and the other on food sustainability labeling. The proposal for a legislative framework for sustainable food systems was presented as the top priority that the European Executive would pursue in this field. However, to date, neither of these two proposals has been put forward. As it has been said, a regulatory framework in this area would certainly be desirable due to the need to promote the principle of sustainable development in relation to agri-food production. However, the pandemic first and the war in Ukraine later have reshaped the EU's order of priorities. Therefore, it seems likely that the legislative proposals on sustainable food systems and food sustainability labeling are not going to be tabled in the foreseeable future. Nevertheless, as far as the promotion of sustainable food systems, something can be argued by taking into account the EU Common Agricultural Policy. In fact, agriculture and food are two sides of the same coin, and there can be no sustainable food systems without sustainable agricultural production. In recent times, the Common Agricultural Policy has become instrumental in achieving objectives that are not necessarily related to the core of agricultural activity, such as the promotion of sustainability. In this regard, conditionality has proved fundamental. Generally speaking, conditionality links the granting of certain benefits, especially financial ones, to the implementation of specific policies and reforms. Over the years, conditionality has become an integral and distinctive feature of the European integration process, through which the member states and third countries are increasingly being pushed to comply with the political, economic, and legal model adopted by the European Union. As far as the Common Agricultural Policy is concerned, the origins of conditionality can be traced back to Regulation 1259 of 1999, which laid down common rules for direct support schemes for farmers. Article 3, entitled Environmental Protection Requirements, provided that member states could reduce or even withdraw support if beneficiaries did not meet the requirements laid down by the member states themselves. Those requirements could take the form of agro-environmental commitments, general mandatory environmental requirements, or specific environmental requirements. Subsequently, Regulation 1782 of 2003 was adopted, which was also dedicated to common rules for direct support schemes under the Common Agricultural Policy. It devoted several provisions to conditionality, establishing that all farmers receiving direct payments would have to comply with mandatory management requirements relating to public health, plant and animal health, the environment, and animal welfare, as set out in a series of EU acts, and maintain the land in good agricultural and environmental condition as defined at national or regional level. In the event of non-compliance with those obligations, direct payments could be reduced or cancelled. Those forms of conditionality were clearly linked to the requirements of agricultural activity and served to justify expenditure that was considered, at least in some member states, to be a form of subsidy without any socio-political economic justification. These were later confirmed in other common agricultural policy-related acts, such as Regulation 1698 of 2005 on support for rural development by the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development, the new Regulation 73 of 2009 on common rules for direct support schemes for farmers, and Regulation 1306 of 2013 on the financing, management and monitoring of the common agricultural policy. As specified in the later regulation, the conditionality mechanism, as an integral part of the common agricultural policy, aims to contribute to the development of sustainable agriculture by raising beneficiaries' awareness of the need to comply with the fundamental standards in the areas of the environment, climate change, good agronomic and environmental conditions of the soil, public health, animal health, plant health, and animal welfare, thereby helping to make the common agricultural policy more responsive to society's expectations. Thus, one can say that over the years, conditionality in the context of the common agricultural policy came to mean environmental conditionality, and although important, it was limited in scope. A social dimension seemed to be necessary too. The rise of an increasingly market-oriented agriculture, supported by the common agricultural policy, has led agricultural businesses to seek not so much to maximize the return on production factors and improve organizational efficiency, but rather to minimize costs by intervening on costs related to product quality assurance and labor costs. That is why the social dimension of conditionality gradually began to emerge, and as early as 2002, the idea was put forward to include the compliance with occupational safety and food safety standards in it. Under Regulation 1698 of 2005, although no penalties were attached, the Member States and the Commission were required to promote equality between men and women and ensure that there was no discrimination based on sex, racial or ethnic origin, religion or belief, disability, age, or sexual orientation during the various stages of implementation of rural development programs. In connection with the Common Agricultural Policy 2014-2020, the need for a change in strategy on the part of agricultural enterprises had been emphasized, with the aim of promoting the development of innovative, competitive, and sustainable agriculture, beginning to refer to the term sustainable not only in terms of economic and environmental sustainability, but also social sustainability. In the Farm to Fork strategy, it was highlighted that it will be particularly important to mitigate the socioeconomic consequences impacting the food chain and ensure that the key principles enshrined in the European Pillar of Social Rights are respected, especially when it comes to precarious, seasonal, and undeclared workers. The considerations of workers' social protection, working and housing conditions, as well as protection of health and safety will play a major role in building fair, strong, and sustainable food systems. In the end, it was with the Common Agricultural Policy 2023-2027 that a change of pace was achieved through Regulation 2115 of 2021, laying down rules on support for strategic plans that Member States must draw up under the Common Agricultural Policy, so-called Common Agricultural Policy Strategic Plans. In addition to traditional environmental conditionality relating to compliance with basic standards in the areas of the environment, climate change, public health, plant health, and animal welfare, social conditionality is also envisaged. In this regard, the regulation requires Member States to specify in their Common Agricultural Policy Strategic Plans that, from January 1, 2025 at the latest, an administrative penalty shall be applied to farmers and other beneficiaries receiving direct or annual payments if they do not comply with the requirements relating to applicable working and employment conditions or the obligations of employers relating to transparent working conditions, health, and safety of workers. In the preamble, it is specified that this is linked to the need to contribute to the development of socially sustainable agriculture through greater awareness of employment and social standards among beneficiaries of common agricultural policy support. As a consequence, one may say that the common agricultural policy is now better suited to promote and achieve sustainable development. In fact, conditionality in the context of the common agricultural policy has evolved into a multidimensional concept, going from being limited to environmental aspects to including a social dimension too. As its scope has broadened to include worker protection, one may say that conditionality has become more pervasive, to the extent that it can now be labeled as enhanced conditionality, aimed at encouraging farmers to achieve better environmental results while optimizing the use of production factors. Thus, the Common Agricultural Policy may be described as a better tool for combating global challenges such as climate change and biodiversity loss, opposing practices that undermine the effectiveness of labor protection regulations, and promoting sustainable development in general. In the light of the strong links between agricultural production and the food industry, it seems fair to say that the conditionality provided for under the Common Agricultural Policy can fill at least one gap in the EU legal system, resulting from the European Commission's decision not to table the legislative proposal on the definition of sustainable food systems as announced in the Farm to Fork strategy. In fact, despite being pivotal in the overall architecture of the Farm to Fork strategy, the European Commission has never defined the concepts of food sustainability and sustainable food systems. Considering that there can be no sustainable food systems without sustainable agricultural production, one might presume that there is continuity between sustainability in the agricultural sector and sustainability in the food sector. The notion of sustainability that can be derived from the Common Agricultural Policy is based on economic development, compliance with the basic standards in the areas of the environment, climate change, public health, plant health, and animal welfare, and respect for requirements relating to working and employment conditions. This should pave the way for a sustainable common agricultural policy, a sustainable European agriculture, and sustainable agricultural products. The latter are then going to be used by the food industry, and just like they follow the value chain that goes from the farm to fork, so should the concept of sustainability. Therefore, food sustainability should combine the three dimensions that have just been mentioned, and sustainable food systems should be the outcomes of that combination.